It's time to get a little bit knee-jerky as we look at the Warhammer Heroes Series 5. Welcome to All Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. It's me, it's Toast. How are you doing today? The Warhammer Heroes line is nothing new after all. We are on Series 5. However, some things have changed, badoosh, but I will look into that in a later video. In this video, I'm going to give you my first impressions on Exactus Krane and his band of miscreants. But before we get into all of that, it's time for a little bit of shilling.
I am shocked. Shocked! Well, not that shocked.
Please consider leaving a like, a comment, and subscribing, as that helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon. And if you want to help in a more tangible way, then please consider signing up to my Patreon or my YouTube members, or using my Element Games affiliate link down below when buying some new Warcry gubbins. A huge shout out to my patrons and members who you can find on screen now. Badoosh. But with all of that out of the way, it's time to get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
And we are back, and I am just going to touch on their battle trait very, very briefly. These guys have the Thunderstrike rune mark, which means they get to use the Thunderstrike battle trait, which is that cool teleport thing that's pretty darn good. There's not much else to say about it, so give it a read, badoosh, and give it a go. Before I get onto their stats and abilities, it's important to understand what these guys are, and in short, they're very similar to the Questor Soulsworn in the sense that they are one warband called the Gladiatorium Fighters, who are all heroes. This basically means two things. You can ally in these guys freely into any order warband, or if you take them as Gladiatorium or as Thunderstrike exclusively, excluding allies, then the hero limit is lifted. Again, if you've played Questor Soulsworn, this rule is more or less the same, with a few caveats here and there. With all of that admin out of the way, let's look at the fighters. And we start with Exactus Krane. This guy is the Knight Arcanum equivalent, and he is 210 points for movement 4, toughness 5, and 20 wounds, and your standard Knight Arcanum profile of a 3-4-2-4 melee profile and a 2-4-3-6 ranged profile. This guy also has the Mystic rune mark, giving him access to that cool Bolt from the Heavens ability, badoosh, that's pretty darn cool. In terms of raw stats, this guy is identical to the Knight Arcanum. The only difference is he is 5 points more expensive, and that's because he has a cool ability called Incisive Mind. Incisive Mind is a triple that reads until the end of the battle round. Each time an enemy fighter within 6 inches of this fighter is activated, you can roll a dice. On a 4+, that fighter cannot use abilities that activation. Incisive Mind is interesting because it's very adjacent to the Ruination Chamber's reaction. What makes Incisive Mind much worse is that it's a triple. So you have to not only set up because you've got to use the ability, but it costs you valuable dice that could be used elsewhere, and it's still just a 4+, and your opponent can definitely play around this because 6 inches, whilst being a fairly substantial distance, you can still just kind of stay out of range, and because you've got to set it up, if you don't get initiative, then your opponent can just use their big hard-hitting ability before you activate, and then Incisive Mind is basically worthless. As cool as Exactus Krane may seem on paper, I do think he is a little bit of a resource trap. If I had the 5 points and I was taking a Knight Arcanum anyway, then yeah, Exactus Krane is a fairly solid upgrade from that. But I wouldn't go out of my way to use him, and his ability is more of a that's kind of cool in a very situational sense. If you want this kind of ability denial, just ally in the cheaper and more powerful Reclusian Prime, and then you're good to go. Next up we have Printis Verna, and this lass is the Vindicator of the group. She is 175 points for movement 4, toughness 6, and 25 wounds. She has a 3-4-2-5 profile at 2 inches of range. Like with Exactus, Printis Verna is just a 5 points more expensive Vindicator Prime, and her stats are identical to a Vindicator Prime. She also gains access to the Prime's ability, badoosh, which is pretty darn cool. But the reason why she's 5 points more expensive is because of her triple, the Unbreakable Defense. Until the end of the battle round count, each critical hit scored from each attack action that targets a friendly fighter with a Thunderstrike Stormcast rune mark that is within 3 inches of this fighter as a hit instead. This cannot affect friendly fighters with the Beast rune mark. This is actually a pretty darn cool ability because Stormcast are incredibly hard to shift in general, being toughness 5, toughness 6, toughness 7, with between 20 and 25 wounds. They're pretty darn hard to kill, but people can roll 6s and those crits really hurt, and this turns them off. If you want to hold an objective, then Printis Verna will make you hold that objective. You plonk your guys on there, you put up your shields, and then you will not be killed. It is so difficult to kill Stormcast who can't be crit. Is she worth 175 points? For a support hero in a very specific role, I think she definitely has play, and this ability is well worth the 5 points. Moving on to Tenya Thrice Trusted. This guy is the Praetor of the bunch, and he is movement 4, toughness 5, 28 wounds, with a 4-5-2-5 profile at 2 inches for 220 points. Like the other two, Tenya Thrice Trusted is just a Praetor Prime for 5 points more with identical stats. He of course retains the ability to heal other heroes, Badouche, and he also gains his own unique triple. It is called Exacting Tutelage. Pick a visible friendly fighter with the Thunder Strike Stormcast rune mark within 6 inches of this fighter. Until the end of the battle round, add 2 to the move, toughness, and attack characteristics of the next melee attack action made by that fighter. This cannot affect friendly fighters with the Beast rune mark. Basically, think of this guy as a far more restrictive Brewgate from Destruction, who is also far better in combat, but also a lot more expensive. The ability itself is incredibly powerful though. Throw this onto an Annie Prime, and this guy goes to movement 5, toughness 8, with 6 attacks at strength 6-3-5 damage. That guy is not going anywhere, and he is punching through just about anything in the game. Combo that with a Questor Soulsworn bonus move action, and then the Annihilator Prime is going to the moon. Of course, that combo requires a triple 8 double and almost 600 points worth of models, but it's pretty darn cool. My main issue with Tenya Thrice Trusted is that you can just take a Calthea Xandai for cheaper, and her triple coordinated strike is just more universally useful. Moving on to Valantin the Harvestblade. This guy is 195 points for movement 4, toughness 5 and 25 wounds with a 5-4-2-4 profile. This guy is your Vanquisher Prime equivalent, and again he is slightly more expensive and gains all the benefits of a Vanquisher Prime. Now the issue with Vanquisher Primes is that they are not all that good. However, Valantin has his own triple called Reaper's Focus, and this thing is pretty darn cool. It reads, this fighter gains a number of focus points equal to the value of this ability. Until the end of this fighter's activation, each time you roll a hit for a melee attack action by this fighter, you can spend any number of focus points. For each focus point spent, count 1 hit scored from that attack action as a critical hit instead. All unspent focus points are lost at the end of this fighter's activation. This ability is incredibly fun. Slap +1 crit or +1 strength onto Valantin and just watch him carve through chaff and mid-range like nobody's business. 5-5-2-4, where up to 6 of your hits become crits, is pretty darn fun. I'm not entirely sure he's worth the points. You can just take an Annihilator Prime who's going to be swinging for just about the same amount of damage and doesn't require a triple to do that, but Valantin does seem like a lot of fun, and I am excited to get this guy onto the battlefield. Moving on to Goltan the Relentless. This guy is an Annihilator Prime with shield with benefits. He is movement 3, toughness 7, 25 wounds, with a 4-5-3-5 profile for 195 points, and of course all the benefits of an Annihilator Prime. Unlike every other model here who's kind of situationally useful and kind of interesting, Goltan the Relentless is just straight up amazing. His triple, Push the Limit, is kind of insane. Each other friendly fighter with the Thunderstrike Stormcast rune mark that is within 6 inches of this fighter and that has any damage points allocated to them can make a bonus move action or a bonus attack action, and again this doesn't affect beasts. This is really cool. This is very similar to Coordinated Strike. The difference is it's got a shorter range and it has no cap. This affects everything within 6 inches if they are injured in any way, shape or form, and unlike Coordinated Strike, you don't have to take Calthea Xandai to do this. You just take Goltan the Relentless, and let's be honest, you're playing Thunderstrike, you'll be taking Annihilator Primes anyway. Just pay the slight point increase and then you gain an incredibly versatile smash tank. Of all the models we've seen so far and all the models we'll see going forward, I think Goltan the Relentless is going to be the guy you will see most often. He is so easy to squeeze in a Thunderstrike list. It's just not even funny. He is such a good value pick. He might actually start replacing Calthea Xandai because he is such a cheap investment. And remember, you can always inflict self-damage by jumping off things or climbing spikes, so you can gain this ability from turn 1 It's pretty darn cool. Onto our penultimate laddie, we have Numara Falconis, 230 points for movement 4, toughness 5 and 25 wounds, with a 3-4-1-4 melee profile and a 3-4-2-4 range profile with a 3 to 15 inch range. Again, beating a dead horse here, Numara Falconis is just a Vigilor Prime who is slightly more expensive and gains all the benefits of a Vigilor Prime. The issue is Vigilor Primes aren't really taken because they're too expensive, and Numara Falconis is even more expensive, but she does gain a triple called the Spark of Invention. Pick a number of friendly fighters equal to half the value of this ability rounded up that are within 6 inches of this fighter and have the Thunderstrike Stormcast rune mark. Until the end of the battle round, each time one of these fighters makes an attack action, you can pick one of the following effects. Add 1 to their strength or add 1 to their crit, and this cannot affect beasts. Numara Falconis, like everyone else here bar Goltan, is interesting but probably just not worth the investment. Her triple's kind of cool and it can be used to bump up your stats somewhat. The issue is she's got a 15-inch range bow and you really want to use that, but her ability only has a 6-inch range and only affects melee stuff. So it's a little bit hard to use, and I don't think people will be using Numara Falconis anytime soon. And our final gladiatorium fighter is Zia Galdara. And this last is unique because she is actually a lot cheaper as opposed to being slightly more expensive than her counterpart. Zia Galdara is 175 points for movement 4, toughness 6 and 25 wounds, and she has a 4-4-2-4 profile. Zia Galdara basically has the melee stats of a basic Liberator but the defensive stats of a Liberator Prime, and her points land her right in the middle of both. And she's a pretty interesting pick because of that. A key thing to note here though is that Zia Galdara does not gain access to Lay Low the Tyrants as she has the wrong rune mark, and this screams to me like Games Workshop designed these before they decided to redesign actual Liberators, because that's a pretty darn big oversight and makes Zia Galdara a much harder sell. She does gain a triple though called The Bigger They Are, and is basically just Rampage with a lot more steps and caveats, badoosh, and yeah, I would rather just have Lay Low the Tyrants, so I don't like Zia Galdara as a result, which is fine, you can take her. If she is updated to use Lay Low the Tyrants in the future, then yes, Zia Galdara is absolutely worth taking then. As it stands now, she's just an interesting in-between pick that really suffers from having potentially the wrong rune marks. And that is the gladiatorium fighters. These guys are all mostly interesting, but the real big winner here has to be Goltan the Relentless. Goltan the Relentless is absolutely insane. He will be a staple in Thunderstrike Stormcast going forward. I am almost positive that ability is so damn powerful, and being an Annihilator Prime, he himself is innately powerful, and again he's only slightly more expensive than your standard Annihilator Prime. It's kind of insane. I am going to touch on this more in a future video, however I am going to put this here now as a quick little disclaimer. I do not recommend buying these at all because of this big change to how Warhammer Heroes works. But douche, it is bullshit, it is scummy, and it is rather freaking disgusting. If you want to use these fighters, these sculpts actually aren't all that great. They're pretty darn basic. Just convert them up, or honestly, just proxy them. Not one person on Earth is going to be able to tell. Of course, you won't get the cards, but that's fine. Just go to warcrier.net and you are good to go. Every stat card, every rule imaginable is on warcrier.net. You will find these here in a couple of days. Use that instead and just save your money. It is not a good set, and we do not want to encourage Games Workshop to continue this kind of malicious practice. But again, another video to go into more depth with that. But that's the end of this video. If you liked what you saw, please hit like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments down below what you think of the gladiatorium fighters. Until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, ta-ra.
Groovy.
Boy howdy, it's Toast, and it's time for the post-toast credits. A huge shout out to my algorithmic demon slayers, Andy Morris, blah blah blah, Head Knight of Paint, Heinz D, Keep Plang, Long Run Hobbies, Lord Phylax, Sable Saber, Mrs. Toast, Steve Bean, The Houston Toad, Tough Tootin' Baby, and Velas. As always, thank you so much for supporting the channel. I'll see you all next time.